All right.
Hola,
Hi, John. How are you?
I am excellent.
Uh,
Delightful talking to you practically, well, not on the other side of the world, but in between the two poles.
that's right. That's right. Um, so where are you right now, John?
I'm in Colombia, South America, and more specifically, it's Minca, a little eco village located in La Nevada de Santa Marta, not far from the coastal town of Santa Marta, but up in the hills.
That's great. So you've written two books. One entitled "The New Mandala," and you wrote that with the Dalai Lama. And I am very curious as to how that opportunity came about.
That's fair enough. But watch out, you're unleashing a can of worms here because I have a few more years under my belt than you do, so that makes all of my stories a little bit long. Okay, the one with the Dalai Lama began with the fact that I made a midlife career change from mostly I had a lot of different jobs, but mostly in the restaurant business, and I made a change into the ministry. I in my late 30s, early 40s, I went to back to the University of Chicago, got a graduate degree in theology, became a minister in the United Church of Christ, Protestant minister, very liberal denomination, by the way. And it was while I was there that I was married to a woman from France who I had known since high school. And her family had had a family priest, Catholic priest, who had been a medical doctor before becoming a priest. And he had been doing some research on the long term effects of meditation on the hypothalamus of the brain. And he wrote a letter to the Dalai Lama back when most people didn't know who the Dalai Lama was. He hadn't won his Nobel Prize or anything like that.
Right.
And he said, asked the Dalai Lama, could I come to India, where the Dalai Lama is living, and live with the monks and have them help me in my research on meditation? The Dalai Lama said, sure, come. So he came, and he was there for about a year, living in a monastery with the monks. And at the end of the year, he met with the Dalai Lama again, and he said uh, he was returning to France, and he said, "What could I do to repay the monks for their hospitality since I've been here?" The Dalai Lama is not stupid; he knows who everybody is. So he said, we could use a clinic for the children in the Tibetan Children's Village. Tibetan Children's Village is where a lot of children go. They're not technically orphans, but their parents send them across the Himalayas from the occupied portion of Tibet, which is occupied now by China. And uh, they send them there to escape the Chinese occupation. So the Dalai Lama said we could use a medical clinic here. So my friend Raphael, the priest, returned to France, put together the financial resources, put together some people resources, and returned to India, started this clinic, and still operating today. So I met him in the south of France in a 12th century church house with braids of garlic and copper skillets hanging from the fireplace. And we talked about religion, and we talked about the Dalai Lama and everything else. And Father Raphael, who's a priest, Father Raphael started encouraging me to think about going to India, spending time with the Tibetan Buddhists and with the Dalai Lama. And he used to say, this is not because you should become a Buddhist. It's because you should grow in your own spirituality, and this is a way to do that. Well, of course, I wanted to do that, but I couldn't do that immediately. I had other things pressing. But finally, I came to a point in my life where I had a little break, a spell between things, and I had no more excuses.
There you go.
So my wife and I went to the south of France. While we were there, he continued to encourage me to go. So finally, I had no choice not to go, and off I went. I spent 6 months there initially, and then came back 2 more times, each time for 6 months. So I had a total of 6 months, a total of a year and a half there. And I had a little sanctioning from my church denomination to make it sort of a cross-cultural and interreligious dialogue event. But as I said, it ended up going on over a period of time. And over time, I began to think, I think there might be a book here. So over the course of those 3 visits, each one 6 months, a book did in fact start to take place. I discussed it with the Dalai Lama and with his personal secretary. They were totally in favor of it. So a short synopsis is that it's Buddhism for non-Christians, particularly, I mean, for Christians, particularly for Christians.
Right.
And so that's the way it is. So we had wonderful discussion.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So you've had a chance to skim through the book. I'm sure you haven't had enough time to really read it,
No,
but
I wish
it's
I
a
could read a book.
little biographical. Yeah, it's a little it covers how am I there and what did I do, and the fact that I was a Christian asking these questions, and needless to say, it changed my life.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So then you have another book that came out a little more recently.
Yep.
Journey to the Heart of the Earth, right?
Journey to the Heart of the World.
Journey to the Heart of the World. And that one, that is what, I mean, that's why you're in Colombia, to find the heart of the world.
It is why I'm in Colombia, but the interesting thing is the Dalai Lama is also why I'm in Colombia.
Oh, really?
Because I met a delegation. Well, after I returned from my last trip to India with the Dalai Lama, I got a job, so to speak. It was partly a volunteer position, partly paid job, at a retreat center and meditation state New York that is affiliated with the office of the Dalai Lama. And while I was there, we used different kinds of retreats, mostly yoga and meditation retreats. But we hosted a retreat it was a gathering actually, for Native American elders from throughout the Americas. And there was a delegation of elders there from the tribes in Colombia. And the staff at the retreat center asked me to be their host because I had experience with different cultures. And so I hosted them, and we hit it off very quickly. We became good friends. They found out about my book with the Dalai Lama, and they said, John, would you come to Colombia? Would you live with us? Would you learn from us? And would you write a book like you wrote with the Dalai Lama, but write a book that would share our message, our spiritual and environmental message? So, of course, just as I did when I had an invitation to go visit the Dalai Lama, I didn't hesitate when I had invitation to visit the Kogi and the Arawaka in Colombia. So I went, and I did just as we were expecting to do. I lived with them for a while. I learned from them, and I wrote a book with them. The book has now been published, and I fell in love with Colombia, and I've not left. In fact, I have no plans to leave. I've been here for 7 years.
That's great. That's great. So that's a perfect transition into one of my next kind of topics. And that's, what are the challenges of, you're from America, you are, like you said, you're a Christian minister. What are the challenges of, being in a place and writing a novel about another culture's, indigenous wisdom? And I mean, obviously you had help working with the elders, but regardless, what are the challenges that you face as an American, writing about Colombia?
Well, that's a super question, because if I were you, I would ask the question exactly the way you just asked it. But in reality, I have hardly ever thought of it as being a challenge. Maybe because my life has been preparing me for it. Okay, I have done so many things which actually led indirectly or in some cases directly to my being here. And and so it was a little bit like in the spiritual field, we talk about what is a person's calling. What is your calling? What is my calling? Okay. And in fact, the word vocation, which is used to mean your job, but originally meant in the church, what was your calling? What is your vocation? A priest or a nun in the Catholic Church is spoken of as having a calling or a vocation in the church. Vocation comes from the Latin, means vocare, which means calling. And so I don't think of it really as a challenge. I think of it as a calling. Okay, that being said, you have some obstacles to overcome. Okay, one of the first obvious ones is even though I lived a lot of my time in the San Diego area of Southern California, I never studied Spanish. So the first thing I had to do was learn how to get around in Spanish. And originally that meant when I met the elders in their reservation, if you want to use that American word, or in their village, I had to have two translators. One from the Arawaco or the Kogi language into Spanish, another from Spanish into English.
Wow.
But I quickly learned that that isn't all that necessary. It's not as necessary as you might think it would be, because this sounds really exotic. But in fact, the elders of the Arawaco and the Kogi, they're, they're, they call them, so they don't call themselves elders, they call themselves mamos. That's just a word in their language that is used to describe the elders. Uh, and what they were wanting to teach me is very, very profound, but it also is simple truth with a capital T. And while that is very profound, it's not complicated. Okay, it doesn't require a lot of words to explain it. So I had a Spanish translator and I had a Kogi translator. Okay, uh, I almost could follow what he was saying just by listening and looking at facial expressions and hand movements and the tone of his voice. You know, people say that language is only a small percentage spoken words. Communication is much more than that. Let me give you an example. One of the first things they taught me was, if you would care for the earth, first you must care for the water. Now think about that. That's a huge concept. But just listen to those words. If you would care for the planet, first you must care for the water. What is it? There's something like 6 words
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
No, very, very, very profound, but very simple if you're talking about it just in terms of language.
Right.
So I quickly found what you were calling a challenge. I quickly found I was able to adjust to very rapidly. So while I had translators and my Spanish was starting to pick up, I also found it was not at all difficult to communicate with these people who speak from a culture that is thousands of years old. Okay, there are 4 tribes, 4 peoples here in Nevada, Colombia, and those 4 peoples have 4 separate languages, but they have a lot in common too. So they talk between themselves very easily. Uh, and I didn't even try to learn anything of their language, but I found myself communicating with them quite quite easily. So very shortly, language was not a challenge.
Yeah.
It it all came uh, very very simply, and I'm not exaggerating when I say it was as simple as, if you would care for the earth, first you must care for the water. It's much of what they have to teach is that simple. So a lot of what I learned from them and what eventually became a part of the book that you've had a chance to at least glance at was sort of deconstructing what I learned in language,
Mm.
letting go. And this is very Buddhist. I learned the same concepts from the Dalai Lama and the Tibetans. A lot of it is letting go of stuff and just being open to the truth, just laying itself bare for you there. And I was living in the nature. If you look over my shoulder, I'm living in the nature right now.
Yeah.
And so that nature is my best teacher. It's anyone's best teacher. It's your best teacher.
Right.
Okay. And so just allowing yourself to be open to pick up on this stuff is it. But we were talking about language. They have 4 different languages. Their languages do not have and have never had a written component, not even hieroglyphics or cave drawing. Okay. Their language is entirely oral, and the history of their culture is carried in the mind of the oldest elders, and they pass it on from generation to generation.
Wow.
Really.
That's incredible. And so I was looking up a little bit about the Sierra Nevada there, um,
Uh-huh.
and it looks so beautiful.
It is.
And then I was interested, in a place like that, what kind of sustains it all? Is there ecotourism involved? Are the communities surrounding the Sierra Nevada supported?
Super. That is a very, very, very good question, and I don't think most people in Colombia could answer it for you. Okay, and all I can do is touch on it a little bit. Uh, First off, it is a shame that that word sustain is a good word. It's a good concept. It's a good word. It's huge. You can unpack it like the Buddhists would, like a lotus flower. Keep peeling back the petals, looking for more and more meaning, deeper and deeper in the center. But sustain is a good word. We talk right now. It's popular among environmental activists, as I sort of consider myself to be, to talk about sustainability. Excuse me. Um, it's a shame we have to talk about that, because when the Kogi and the Arawaco and the other 2 tribes that are here were running the place, when they were running the show before the Spanish showed up in 1492, it was sustaining itself just beautifully, both economically and naturally. You know, the biosphere. Um, the United Nations has recently recognized La Sierra Nevada as the most their language, the most irreplaceable bioreserve on the planet.
Wow.
Okay, and it is technically, La Sierra Nevada in Spanish means the snowy mountain, singular. And it is technically a mountain. It has a lot of peaks and valleys, but it is technically one mountain that you can identify. And while it sits next to the Andes, it is geologically distinct from the Andes, formed at a different time in a different manner. Okay, it's a pyramid-shaped mountain, the base of it, and it starts in the Caribbean Sea, where the beaches that I go to are located, and it rises quickly to 18,000 feet in a horizontal distance of only 26 miles.
Wow.
So it is very, very. I live on the side of one of those hills on the mountain. Okay, so I'm always walking up and down hills. The water is always running downhill. Okay, the peaks, the 18,000-foot peaks, are glacial peaks. They're always covered with snow. Now that's receding now, just like frozen everything in the whole planet is, the North Pole and the South Pole and everything else. Okay, and the indigenous peoples became aware of that some years ago, and they managed to figure out, I don't know why, they probably had some transistor radios, and they came to understand that the white man, who they call the younger brother, they say they are the elder brother, and the younger brother was chased out of the country 500 years ago, and uh, the indigenous began to be aware of the changes that were happening around, and they also began to be aware that those changes were caused by the younger brother, the Industrial Revolution, and everything since then. And so they began to, somehow they learned that the younger brother got all of his information about what's happening in the world from the BBC. Now go figure. They managed to invite a journalist, well-known journalist from the BBC, to come because they had a message for the outside world. And that message was that our Earth Mother was dying, was very ill, and she would surely die if we did not change our ways. Okay, so Alan Herrera came here and lived with them for a while, like I did. Well, he did write a book, but the book was more or less about how his documentary. It's a 90-minute BBC documentary that he put together. And the indigenous peoples were quite surprised and disappointed because they thought as soon as they told Alan Herrera what was going on, Alan Herrera would go back and tell the world, okay, and then problem over, okay, everybody would change their ways. Well, we're still here and we're still working at it.
Yeah.
That hasn't happened. Okay, but that's what happened. A little bit more about La Sierra Nevada because you're talking about sustainability. If it were left alone, it would sustain itself.
Right.
Okay, different peoples, the different indigenous peoples live at different altitudes, and they're migratory, but they're not what we normally think of as nomadic. Most of them have a village in one place where the microclimate is humans to live. Okay, and then they have other crops and other animals that they shepherd living at different altitudes. So they don't think of themselves as like, do I live in this village or do I live in this? Well, they live on the mountain, and they have different things going on in different places in the mountain, including fish from the sea.
Mm.
But economics have changed things, so they can't just wander everywhere, wander into what are now touristy fishing villages and go catch their fish. It doesn't work that way. Okay, there are fishermen there who earn their living, and they really have to buy their fish if they want fish. So what do they do to buy fish? Well, they have to do something else. One of the things that they were raising was coca leaves. Coca leaves are used to make cocaine.
There you
Okay,
go.
but the indigenous people here use the coca leaves as a stimulant. In fact, the coca leaves were originally the stimulant ingredient in Coca-Cola. In fact, Coca-Cola still has permission, a license, to import coca leaves from Colombia to the United States. They don't do it. They don't do it anymore. They use a synthetic stimulant instead of coca. But my point is, trading from different altitudes. They raise animals that are at one altitude. They raise crops that are another altitude, and they trade for fish that are down by the coast. Okay, so all of this goes on. Now that we're in a capitalist society and they find themselves landlocked in the middle of that, they do all different kinds of things. They wear, I don't think you can quite see it, but you'll see it in a minute. They wear, come out here. They wear woven mochilas. Come on, why are you doing this to me? Can you see this? I can't see the monitor well.
Oh yeah.
Okay, they wear these all the time. Sometimes 2 or 3 of them. They use them to carry everything when they go up and down the mountain They go from one house to another. Okay, they have a small one they use for the coca leaves, because when they meet another Kogi, for example, they exchange coca leaves. They give one to one elder, he gives them some back. Giving and receiving is a very popular spiritual tradition, many spiritual traditions. Okay, but my point is, they sell these mochilas now to tourists. They
Oh,
command a pretty good price. So that's one of the ways that, that they make money. They thrived as much as possible without money. I mentioned Alan Herrera of the BBC. When he came, the time that he came, white men had never been in their villages. Okay, and they didn't get by then by trading with the white men. They kept they lived very high in the mountain, and they kept very isolated. That's why they survived when the Incas and the Mayas and the Aztecs did not. They went high up in the mountains, blocked themselves off, burned their bridges, literally, to keep the conquistadors from coming in, and they survived. In fact, not only have they survived, they're thriving. They're building new villages. Their villages are growing.
that's fantastic.
So it is. Okay, so I don't know if that answered your question, but how do they thrive? They thrive by being very self-contained. They have everything they need on the mountain, on La Sierra Nevada. Okay, they have everything that they need, and they see as their job. You know, most every animal has a job. For example, the honeybees pollinate the flowers and make honey. Okay, every animal has some kind of a job, and the animals do it unquestioningly. The only exception to that rule is humans.
Yeah.
We don't know what our job is. Whatever it is, we fucked it up. All right. So, but the Kogi have not, and the Kogi and the Arawaku and the other two tribes. They know that it is their job to care for their Earth Mother. It has always been their job, even before they began to see that their mother's health was deteriorating. All along, they have felt that is the reason human beings are on the planet. That's why my book is called Journey to the Heart of the World. They believe that this place is the heart of the world, physically, number one. And number two, they believe that human beings are meant to be the heart of the world.
Wow.
And so it is our job to be the living, breathing, or be the heart of the living, breathing, organic system, organism that we call our Earth Mother. Okay? And we have a unique capacity to be that. We can envision what we need to do for her to sustain her into the future. We can look at her and we can recognize, we can diagnose what's wrong with her, and we can do things to correct that. There's no other animal that does that. Okay, and to get really cosmic, okay, we can understand that it is our job to love our Earth Mother. Okay, other animals don't have the capacity to love in that manner. Okay, so when I say it is our job to become the heart of the world, I mean it is our job to become the living, breathing, caring, loving heart of the organic planet.
Right.
The indigenous have believed that for years and years. And we focus here on the four tribes that are here. They're somewhat unique because they're unspoiled largely. Okay, but that quality of indigenous people to believe that it is their job to care for their Earth Mother is true of the Hopi and the Navajo and the Dakota and the Inca and the Aztec and the Maya. Okay, it is part of our makeup as indigenous human beings. Okay, and all indigenous means is the first human beings. Well, we're all the first human beings. We've just screwed up.
Right.
Okay, we have not recognized what our job is. Okay, we think our job is to make a lot of money and have fun. the the indigenous peoples who have lived on the land and recognize that that land, use your word, is what sustains them.
Right.
They understand that, okay, and they have not historically had much use for their younger brother, who they think just wanted to have fun and not do his job.
Right. Well, I think
So
it's a perfect
how
answer.
have they survived? A big way that they have, because I think your question was in part was in the short history of 500 or so years. How have they survived when other indigenous cultures have not? And the big way that they survived was from day one. The first time they saw these ships with wings of cloth come flying onto their shore, they immediately ran up into the mountain, burned their bridges, and shut themselves off from these guys.
Wow.
And that's how they survived. And
Yeah.
now that they're more connected, now that they almost have no choice to be connected, they are the ones who took the initiative to make their connection with you and I, with the ones they call the younger brother, to make that work. They asked me to come here and learn from them and spread the message to the others. That was just a small part of the way they feel that they have to interact with the younger brother totally. It is to teach them what their job as human beings is and to encourage them to be about that
I think it's beautiful. I think, I think it's interesting the difference in how a lot of indigenous cultures are viewed and have been viewed historically and treated as subordinates when, from their eyes and really in the eyes of, you know, if you're looking at this in terms of, is this a culture that respects the earth and understands the earth? They are far from subordinate, and in fact, they are, as they say, the older brother. I think
job.
that's
And Colombians today uh, treat their indigenous peoples with a great deal of respect. Okay, and it's a and that has been historic, and it's much different to the history of the United States of America, where when the first Spanish arrived, and then later the Dutch, and I've forgotten the other countries that the Portuguese came. Uh, they came here thinking that uh, they already owned this land before they'd ever seen it. They thought that they could just come here and take it over. It was theirs for the taking. Okay, the first, not the first, but early chapter of my book is exactly that. It's an elder explaining it to the character in my book about what happened when the first indigenous came here. So a big difference is the indigenous here were smart enough to realize that they had to just shut themselves off from this crazy younger brother, or they weren't going to survive.
right.
And it worked. So by the time they began to interact more with, say, the Spanish Colombians that are here now, he did so in a manner where they felt that they had a gift to give to the white man. Okay, and that gift was not the gold that was here. There was plenty of it. The gift that they had to give them was an orientation, to an understanding, okay, that they were put here on the planet to care for their Earth Mother, and if they did that, the Earth Mother would take care
That's beautiful. Well, I'm sure we could talk about Colombia all day, and we're
of
not
them.
wrong
Right?
in your email saying that all of this was just bait to get me to visit Colombia. Uh, I've already wanted to. I have a friend who lives there, and then having Estela Porras as a professor. Obviously she just talks about the beauty of Colombia all the time. But I do want to touch on your Twitter account because you're very active on Twitter. And my question for you in regards to that is, how do you think, a social media site like that plays into global issues and spreading awareness about those kinds of things? And do you think it's a positive or a negative tool for, people to
But
have?
let me give you try and give you a quick answer that will lead to bigger answers. Um, yes, I'm very active. Okay, I have more than 50,000 followers on Twitter. Okay, I have 5,000 followers or friends, on Facebook, and that's the limit. But you can have an unlimited number of followers who you don't. The Facebook platform doesn't allow you to interact with followers exactly in the same manner. You couldn't do it. If you're trying to have some kind of an intimate friendship with 10,000 people, it doesn't work. So I have 10,000 followers on Facebook in addition to more than 50,000 followers on Facebook. I have a service that tells me what's going on with my Twitter account. I have weeks where I have interactions with more than 1 million people on Twitter in a week.
Wow.
And and I'm not even famous on Twitter.
Yeah.
I mean, some people think I am, but I'm not. Okay, let's face it, I'm not. I promote my books on there a little bit, but mostly what I do is I repost other stuff with a little bit of a lead in to it, and so a little clickbait to get people to look at the article, and consequently, I generate a lot of. And the main thing I'm focused on, main reason I started doing all of this was climate and the environment. But you can't sell. I have some people that say, how come you have so much stuff about Trump and politics on there when you're about climate and the environment? I said, because you can't separate the two. I tell people in my books you can't separate nature and anything else. Nature is not over there and I'm over here. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
Nature is everywhere. Okay, well, the same is true with issues of climate and the environment and politics. They're not separate. Okay, I mean, Donald Trump is screwing up the planet, and we don't. I don't see us addressing that cancer that is Donald Trump by, for example, asking Donald Trump to read my book and come away loving his Earth Mother. That doesn't do it. Okay, I mean, just this 2 days ago, I think Pompeo, Trump's um, Secretary of State, I can't keep track of his revolving door, uh, was at a conference of our allies who are trying to deal with the Arctic and the Antarctic. Okay, and they had a lovely agreement for these allies to sign, and in the end, it didn't get signed because the United States wouldn't sign it because there was too much reference to climate change, according to the Trump administration.
Right.
And what did Pompeo say in the same breath? We have some wonderful opportunities here because the sea levels are receding. And that's going to open opportunities for shipping trade through the Arctic Circle. I'm not telling you this. I did not make up.
It always sounds like it's made up. Anytime you have these conversations and you watch the videos, or you hear what someone has said from the administration, it tends to feel like it may have been made up.
Exactly. So what do? The biggest question people who do take the environment and climate change seriously, the biggest question they ask is, yeah, but what can I do? I'm just little old me. What can I do? Okay. Well, I have come to believe that one of the things I can do is use social media. Okay. Uh, I wish it could do more, and there are a lot of people who are using social media to just spin their wheels. Okay, I watch It's Funny during the day because I'm on it constantly through the day, and I see things change. and stuff that's happening with Trump and stuff that's happening with the environment, and a lot of that will start in the morning, and then it will wind down a little bit during the day, and then I start to see stuff about baseball and the Cubs and who else? Oh, and then the British football league teams like. What are some of those names? I should remember because football's so popular here in Colombia. But what I'm getting at, different people use social media for different things.
Right.
Okay, there are plenty of people who are very social and have no interest in climate change and the environment. That's not what they're there for. They have no interest in Donald Trump. That's not what they're there for. Okay, but they're going to see shit that I post, whether they're interested in it or not. Going to be there. It's just like Manchester United is trending, even though I have no interest in Manchester United.
Right.
But all of a sudden, I learned something. Manchester United is very important to a lot of people in different parts of the world.
Right.
Okay, and so I have an entree there. I can play that to my benefit if I want. Okay, so I honestly think that in this age that you and I are living in now, there's nothing that you and I, who are not climate scientists, can be doing any more with any more value than finding ways to connect issues and people and inform ourselves and then inform others. Then by using social media in a constructive manner. And you know, it doesn't, I knew nothing about this until 2008, just a little bit before going into the election that ultimately elected Obama. I think that was 08. In any case, I know it was 08 that I got involved. I got involved in a backwards way. I wanted to do some volunteer work, and I had never been to Africa. I'd been to a lot of different parts of the world, but I started to look for things and volunteer opportunities. A lot of nonprofit groups were using social media early on. I think my first introduction was MySpace, and so then that connected me with an organization that turned out to be semi-quackery, but nonetheless, it got me to Kenya, and I did some volunteer work in Kenya, and I learned how to use the internet to support that kind of volunteer work and that nonprofit work. Then I got going with Facebook. I remember seeing on the internet that there was a seminar how to use social media for nonprofit organization. Okay, well, I'll do this. Okay, and it quickly told me that I needed to be on MySpace and I needed to be on Facebook. So I got on. I didn't know what to do, and I got on, and I learned. Okay, I learned quickly. Twitter came later. Okay, I still have people who now ask me. The bulk of my social media people I came to develop real relationships with was on Facebook, and people still ask me on Facebook, what do you do on Twitter? I don't see the value of it. Then interestingly enough, in the next breath, I will be on Twitter, and Twitter people, especially because there's some friction now with Zuckerberg and the past election and what was going on Twitter. I have Twitter people saying, what do you Twitter people saying, what are you doing on Facebook people saying, what are you doing on Twitter? And now I have Twitter people saying, what are you doing on Facebook? Facebook's a waste of your time. Okay. What do you do on social media?
I don't have any social media.
Don't you? Okay.
So when
All
I was a senior in high school, I just got rid of it all one day because I wanted to try it. I was tired of having it as a constant distraction.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I got rid of it. And for me personally, I don't. I mean, later in life, I might use it to stay connected. Especially, I want to travel a lot. So, creating a Facebook profile to, maintain those connections that I make when I see the world. I totally envision that, but I'm the type of person that can get way too caught up in, the social media vortex. So,
Well, and I have had to do that at times myself. Uh, I mean, Zuckerberg started Facebook as a way of impressing a girlfriend and ultimately getting her. Okay, he did impress her, but he ended up getting somebody else as his final girlfriend. But but yeah, that's what it was originally all about, and it's what it's still all about for a lot of people. But I would be happy to talk to you over time. We can have conversations like this as often as you want. Okay,
absolutely.
and because I've had these discussions, I've had them in my own head with myself. Am I wasting time? It is very easy to waste time there, but I have come away. You don't get 50,000 followers without working at it. You have to work at it seriously. It's one
Right.
of the downsides for Facebook people looking at Twitter. They say, I don't see any value. You won't see any value until you've worked it, until you've turned it into something that is of value. And I'm at that point. But uh, uh, it doesn't almost doesn't matter. Do I like it or not? Do I want to be involved or not? It is a part of who and what we are in 2019,
Right.
and so it's there. It's free. Uh, there is a lot that you can do with it. And again, going back to this question about climate change and the environment, this seminal fundamental question: what can I do? One of the things you can do is learn how to make a difference on social media. For example, some people who see themselves as climate activists right now, Greta Thunberg, she's the 16-year-old from Sweden that has just turned turned things crazy. She started the global school strike. Okay, she has leaders in the world, including in the United Nations, who are consulting with her, asking what we should do. And she's 16 years old, and she's done everything on the internet. Okay, so for an activist just getting started, saying, "What can I do?" One of the things that have some of those activists have their answer they've come up with is, I can organize a protest. I can organize a day off of school to talk about climate change issues.
Hmm.
Okay, well, how do you make that happen? You make that happen on social media. And
Right.
you don't make it happen just by having what used to be a MySpace account and talking to your friends. You have to know what you're doing. You have to organize it. You have to bring all the threads together. And and young people are the ones that can do it. Okay, it isn't 50-year-old people, or in my case, 70-year-old people. Well, okay, maybe I am making it happen, but it is largely a young people's tool, and that's fine because it is the young people's planet that we 72-year-olds are screwing up. Okay, and so they are taking hold of it. Your generation are taking charge of social media and using it to change the world, using it to change the way people think. And you can do that. If a 16-year-old with autism in Sweden can do that, you can do it. I firmly believe at this moment, she's been nominated for a Nobel Prize, and I wouldn't be surprised if she gets it. Okay, uh, if she can change the world from Sweden, you can change the world from Monterey. And more important than that, more important than you setting goals to change the world, you can encourage others to change the world. And you can change this guy's uh, uh, climate change science. You can take it and you can put it in the lap of some non-climate change person over here and change the way they think and the way they interact with the world and the way they stimulate others to do the same. You haven't gotten to the end of my book yet, but my book, Journey to the Heart of the World, that's one of the things they say to the hero in the book. Okay, you have to evaluate every choice you make in life, and you have to encourage others to do the same. That's the message of the book in a nutshell. And social media is a vehicle for doing that, for anybody to do that, to evaluate and get information so they can make good choices, number one. And then number two, so that they can teach and encourage others to make good choices. Social media is the way to do that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, John.
Okay, you've got my email address now. Okay, talking on Twitter is not the way to go. Post some good stuff on Twitter, and I'll give you ideas on how you can be a powerful voice on Twitter. It's not easy; it takes work, but I will show you how to do it. Okay, but then, not then, because that's a long-term endeavor. As soon as tomorrow. Okay, whenever you want to talk, you send me an email. We'll make a plan to do what we're doing here. Your platform at the university seems to be an excellent platform. I've used various other platforms at times, and some of them spend more time playing with a freaking platform than you do having a conversation. And this seems to be quite easy and quite effective. So let's do it. But we can't do it without making an appointment to do so. So
that's right.
The best is to communicate just with email, and you've got my email address.
Absolutely.
All right.
It's been a pleasure to meet you, and hopefully I'll get to visit Colombia soon.
I will facilitate that. My mi casa is su casa, and you would have to work very hard on the internet, on places like Airbnb and others, to put together a place to stay as good as the one that I can offer you for free. So,
all right, John. Well, hopefully we'll be talking soon.
Super, amigo.
All right. I'll probably end up reading all of your books this summer. Get to complete them once I get through these finals and get some free time.
No problem.
And I'll email you with a very stern critique.
If you think any time of, I mean, I don't know what your plan was with this interview, but I got the impression that it was to have something that you could do something with. This is my interview with John Lundin. If you want to ask an additional question and get an additional answer and splice it all in to make a better interview, we can do that. The other thing is, if you want to send me an email with a question that I can think about and give you a well thought out answer, I'm happy to do that.
Absolutely. Well, I have to write a 5-page paper about you, so I'll send you a copy.
Okay, and you can also, by the way, just Google John Lundin, okay, and you'll see some articles about John Lundin that may help you.
Great. All right. It was a pleasure talking to you, sir.
My pleasure. Ciao.
See ya.
Where do I hang up here? Leave the meeting. There it is.